Good evening, all. I hope you all doing well. So we'll start for the day. Shivaram sir, you can take over the class.
Thanks, ma'am. Good evening. So, good evening, all. So, I hope everyone had a wonderful day. So, we'll start the session. Let me just share my screen. Okay. So, welcome all. So, today we're going to start Next.js. So, today and tomorrow it's going to be Next.js. So, after that, from the next week, we're going to cover some advanced topics related to full stack development. Okay. So, coming to Next.js, let me just give a quick recap of what we went through yesterday. What we have went through yesterday, we went through what is Node.js, and then we went through what is asynchronous programming, right? And then we went through what is synchronous, and then we got to know the difference between synchronous and asynchronous. Okay. Then we got to know what is an event loop, right? Without event loop, asynchronous function is not possible programming. Then we learned what is call stack, what are web APIs, and then what is event loop, callback event, all right? And then after this, we set up a node project, right? How did we do that? First, we installed, and then using this command npm init -y, we created a node project. Then after this, we went through what is file system, and then we went through every method in a file system has two ways. One is synchronous and asynchronous way. Okay, here you can see this is how you read a file in synchronous way. This is how you read a file in asynchronous way. The only key difference is in asynchronous way, you need to pass a callback function. Okay. Then we went through how to write, and then how to delete, and then how to make repositories. After that, we went through what are path modules, how to access the current path and current directory names. And then we created a custom event. We also emitted as well as we listened through it through on. And then we went through what is HTTP module, right? We created a mini server using this. And then we went through what is NPM. So what is NPM? NPM is a node package manager through which you can install all your packages. And then what are the packages we went through? Node.1 and Express.js, right? And then what is Express.js? Express.js is nothing but a framework with using this, you can build your backend. Okay, you can write APIs also, you can send HTML, JSON, so different stuff. It is lightweight, and then it also supports middleware. So we also created a custom middleware, right, for authentication and current date and time. And also we went through water routings through HTTP methods. And then yesterday, we also went through what is MongoDB, right? What we did, using MongoDB, we connected our database, right? How do I access my MongoDB? MongoDB Compass. So what we did yesterday, let me just open the file. I'll maximize this. Let me just open folder. Where was it? What was it? Yes, it was in the REST APIs, right? Yeah. So now here what we did, first you can see in the package.json, let me just zoom in. We installed three dependencies. One was MongoDB, Mongoose, and then Node.1. What is Mongoose? Mongoose acts as a ORM. Okay, object relational modeling. So through this, you can communicate with the database. And then what we did, first we imported both of it. And then using app, we connected MongoDB through what? Connection string. So this is our connection string. And then afterwards, what we did, we created a database name. So after that, we created a post and get method. How do we interact through your database? We cannot directly write. So what we did, we created a schema. Through this schema, we created a model. Through this model, what we did, we find, we did the find method as well as we did the create method. Okay. So yesterday we had successfully created these two methods, and then we got to know how do we connect our backend to the database. So now coming today, let me just close this. So I'll close this also. This is not required. So coming today, what is Next.js? So you guys would have come across this word, right? Next.js. So what is Next.js? So Next.js, Next.js is nothing but a framework. Okay. The thing is, say for example, you want to build a front-end application, for example, like full stack application. So what we did in React, we created a separate project and then we run in the localhost. And then for backend, what we did, we created a separate project and then we ran in the localhost. Okay, so now if you want to communicate through each other, what we have to do, we need to communicate our front end and back end, which has been running separately. So what they did is there's a company called as Vercel, which created this Next.js. So what they did is like instead of two, they thought of an idea like why couldn't we combine together? So what they came up with, they came up with a framework. This is nothing but a React framework. So what is React? React is a library. It's not a framework. Next.js is a React framework through which you can create a full stack application. The thing in Next.js is it has tools for both front end and back end development. So that means if you learn Next.js, you don't have to learn React separately and Express.js separately. So that means you don't have to write two different codes. Inside one single framework, you can create both front end as well as back end. That's the use of Next.js. You understood, right? This is a full stack framework. That means you can do front end as well as back end inside a single framework. Okay, you don't have to learn Express to create backend and then React. So for this, you need to know React, or else you cannot study Next.js because this is built on React. Okay, so you understood, right? It is a full stack framework which you can build both front end and back end. So what does Next.js? You can see here, if you use, for example, when we built our React project, right? So what we did, we installed so many packages like Redux, and then for routing, we installed React Router DOM. So in Next.js, you don't have to worry about packages and all. So you won't be depending upon third-party packages. Everything is given to you. Okay, it's up to you guys. Okay, what and all it provides? First is it has an inbuilt routing. Okay, you don't have to install a separate package for routing. And then it has an inbuilt API routes. Okay, and then it has a different rendering schema. So we'll go through what is that. And then you can also use for data fetching as well as styling and optimization. So you can see here, these are all the different options which will be available if you use Next.js. Okay, if you learn Next.js, you don't have to learn backend and front end separately. So inside a single framework, you can create both front end and back end. Okay, so before that, we'll just go through the rough differentiation of what is React and Next.js. So what is React? So React is nothing but a JavaScript library. That means it's lightweight. It doesn't have much going on in it. It is just used to build a simple UIs. So, but with Next.js, it is a full stack framework. That means it has everything. Okay. Then there is a concept called as server-side rendering. So you don't have to worry about it. So we'll go through this. As of now, just know that there is something called as server-side rendering. And in React, it doesn't support it. Whereas Next.js, it supports server-side as well as static generation. So we'll go through what are these topics. So as of now, you just get easy with the keywords. And then the learning curve. React is easy to learn, whereas Next.js, it's kind of hard because you can you're building both front end and back end inside a single application, right? So that's the reason why it'll be hard to learn. And then you have something called as performance, documentation, community. You can see React is very popular, whereas Next.js, it's still evolving. Okay, it's not as popular as React, but it's still evolving. And then there are different use cases. And then you can see here, the reason the most of the people prefer Next.js is because SEO. Do you know what is SEO? Search engine optimization. The problem with React is all the apps which are built through React, they do not have a good support for SEOs. So, but like whereas if you build the app in Next.js, it has a very good compatibility with ACOs, and then it has faster performance due to SSR. We'll go through what is SSR. SSR is nothing but a server-side rendering, and then it has an inbuilt routing. So here you guys will get confused because this is kind of confusing and tricky at the starting. So once you get hang of it, you'll get to know the workflow. Here, what happens is the routing is in Next.js, they use something called as file-based routing. We'll go through what is that. And then it has full stack compatibilities. That means you can create your like components as well as the backend API inside a single application. Okay. Then, so now let's just set up Next.js. So for that, what you need to do is first you need to go to your Chrome, and then first you need to install Node.js. How do you install Node.js? Just go to your Node.js application, click on this, download Node.js. So once this is installed, what you need to do, I'll go to my desktop, I'll create a new file, Next.js projects, then hit enter. Okay, then I'll go to my VS Code file, open folder, I'll select that Next.js projects. Okay. So now once you have opened this, here what you need to do is you can click on OK. You set as the authors. So here you need to open the terminal, okay, new terminal, and then you need to change this to command prompt. Okay, you can see here command prompt. Once that is done, you need to check whether your path is matching here. You can see here my both paths are matching. So once part is done, you can see how do you install Next.js. The command is npx, not npm. So here, don't get confused. This is npx create hyphen next hyphen app at latest. So what we'll do, we'll type that command here. Okay, what is that? npx space create next app at latest. Okay, and then hit enter. Once you hit enter, follow these steps because this is at the starting, it's kind of tricky. So what is the project name? So I'll just give something called as demo app. Okay. Sorry, here everything should be lowercase. If it is uppercase, it will throw an error. So demo app, and then hit enter. The first question marks, like the first option it will ask is, do you want to use TypeScript? Here you need to hit enter, yes. Do you like to use ESLint? For this option also, you need to click on yes. Do you like to use Tailwind CSS? We went through what is Tailwind CSS, right? Where did we use it? When we build our calculator project, right, in React. So we want to use this in our Next.js also. I'll click on yes. Do you like your code inside a SRC director? For this option also, you need to click on yes. Would you like to use app router? For this also, you need to click on yes. Would you like to use turbo pack? For this, you need to select no. Okay. And then would you like to customize the import alias? For this also, you need to click on no. Once this is done, what the Next.js will do, it will start installing. You can see here, this will take some time. You can see these are the commands you need to give. TypeScript, yes, ESLint, yes, Tailwind, CSS, yes, SRC, yes, app router, yes, turbo pack, no, and then at last, it's no. Once this is done, it will start installing. It will take some time. So by that time, we'll go through our PPT. So we went through what are here. We went through what is server-side rendering, right? So now we will see what is server-side and client-side rendering. You guys would have got familiar with these terms by now, right? What is server? What is client? Client is your browser. What is server? Server is your backend. That means your like Express.js application or different application which runs in your system. Now you got to know what is client and server, right? It's very simple as that. So if you go through this in YouTube and all, they'll complicate you. So I'll try to break it down as simple as possible. Server-side rendering means inside the name itself, it says. So the components, right? So whenever you write something, the UIs, so how do you do that? You write it as components, right? We learned in Angular also, we created components. In React also, we created components. The thing is, whenever you create some components, in Next.js, what happens is there are two options to run the components. One is client-side rendering. Second is server-side rendering. So what is server-side rendering means? Inside the name itself, you'll know server-side rendering. That means whatever components, every component has two ways to get rendered. One is on server, one is on client. Okay, server-side rendering means the component gets rendered on the server itself. Okay, here you can see server components, client components. It is executed on the server itself. Server means our backend itself. What are client components? These are executed in the browser, which is the client. This is called as client-side rendering. In the name itself, you'll get to know what are the definitions. And then in Next.js, right, all components are by default server components. That means every component you create in Next.js, by default, it gets executed in the Next.js itself. Okay, not in the browser. Whereas if you want to create a client components, we'll go through this syntax and all through the programming. So as of now, just get to know the definitions part of it. Okay. Server-side components means it will get executed in the server itself. That means in your Next.js application. Okay, here, which is the backend, your Next.js application. Whereas client means the component gets rendered in the browser. Okay. And then in Next.js, all components are default to server components. If you want to use client components, right, you need to specify this keyword. Use client at the top. Sorry, this is use client. Okay. Use client at the topmost to make it a client component. And then it has the ability to run tasks like static content, read file, and fetch data. That means the server components, right? I'll try to still break it down. Server components, they try to break it as steps. So what I'll do is I'll try to explain it as in the form of steps. Server components means they execute in the server itself. Since they get executed in the server, they cannot access browser APIs. That means they cannot access hooks, they cannot access events, they cannot access different like set timeout, set time in, and because all this comes under the browser. The only thing they can do is they can fetch the data from the backend. They're used for static generation as well as data fetching and then file reading. Okay, you can see they don't have the ability to use hooks because they get executed in the server. Whereas client components, what happens is, since these components gets executed in the browser itself, they can access the browser APIs. That means they have access to events, they can access hooks, they can like have different access. So what is the main key most thing you have to remember here is, the thing is, when you render a component in the server itself, right? When a client make request, it will just get the preloaded data. That means you don't have to execute it again. Whereas the client components, right? All your HTML, JS, and your CSS gets sent to the browser, and then the browser will start executing it. Here you can see the client components consume a lot of time to execute because it has to execute everything in the browser. Whereas server components, everything will be executed in the server itself. It will just give you the preloaded format. So the browser won't have to reload it again. Okay, this is just the difference. So now we'll see, yeah, now my Next.js has been successfully installed. So once this is done, you can see here, I'll just give a quick recap of this folder structure. If you open this, you can see this looks similar to which your React, right? First, you have tsconfig. That means your TypeScript configuration. Here, you don't have to go into this. I'll close this. This is for your TypeScript configuration. And then you have Tailwind config. That means your Tailwind is also configured. That means it has been added. And then README file is nothing but your documentation. You have post CSS, which is up to you can use it. And here you have two things, package and packages. And here you can see there are three dependencies: React ROM, and Next.js. Okay, here you can see Next.js is nothing but a framework which is built on React. That means all the React things we learned, right? They can be applied on this Next.js. Okay. And then you have something called as next.config. Here you can configure your Next.js application. And then this and all, it's unnecessary. And here you can see you have node modules. Node modules is nothing but your all your npm modules. You have public for your static files. You have src, and then inside src you have an app. These are the most key things in here. Okay. So now once this is done, let us run our application. So how do you run it? It's similar to React. So like what is the command to run in React? npm run dev. So once you hit enter, sorry, I need to, you can see here, my path is not matching with my project. I need to go inside, right? What is the command? cd space tab. Now I need to type npm run dev. So once I hit enter, you can see my Next.js has been successfully run. So how do I do that? Inside local, you need to copy this and then go to the browser and paste it. So let it load. It's loading. It will take some time because it needs some time to set up. You can see, yeah, my Next.js app is successfully running. Here you can see. Okay. On which port is this running? Port 3000. Okay. You understood it? Now you guys have successfully know how to create a Next.js app and then how to run the Next.js app. Okay. Now we will see how do I change this data. Okay. How do I change this? Here in app, right? You'll be usually having 3 folders here. So this is fav icon. You can just ignore this. This is nothing but icon which you get on top here. You can see this icon, right? This is your fav icon. Okay, here you can see there are 3 most important files in your app. Okay, first is global.css. That means all your global CSS gets added here. Okay, if you compare to React, in React we have something called as style.css, right? Which is through this through that file you can put all your global css. So similarly, if you want to add any global css, you can add it inside here. So what I'll do, I'll just remove this. You need these three. You should not remove these 3 files because without this you cannot use Tailwind CSS. You just need to remove only these files, this code. Okay, once this is done, come to your page.tsx. Here you can see, here is the code. You can see, what is this? Export default function home, and then it is returning something. This is similar, right? Similar to what? Similar to your React. This is nothing but your JSX. We went through what is JSX, right? Every component will start with a capital name, and then it will be exported by default, and then it will return a JSX. Here you can see all this are JSX. You can see here, flower brackets, your setting number. Everything is your JSX. So what I'll do, I'll remove this full thing, and then I'll create a div here. Div. Hello. I'll create a h1 tag. Next.js. So now, if I open this, you can see. Let me refresh this. Where is the terminal? Come at the last. You can see here. Allow my first Next.js app. So my Next.js app is successfully rendering, and then I can modify it. So how did you modify inside your page.tsx? We'll go through what is page.tsx. So as of now, you got to know, right? This is nothing but your React. So this, whatever Next.js code you know, before diving into Next.js, you guys should get familiar with React. Okay, here you can see there is a component here. Every component will return a JSX. Okay, you understood this? So now what is this component? Is this a client or server component? This is a server component. Why? Because I mentioned here, every Next.js component by default is a server component. So how do I check that? So what you, for example, if you want to check a component as is whether server or client, what you have to do is you just console log something. Okay, I'll just console log log like this. Hello from Next.js. So now what happens if I go here, if I refresh, click on inspect, and then go to your console. Here you can see my message gets printed, as well as there is some small message next to it. It is saying server. That means this component is a server component. Okay. That means whatever this home is there, this gets executed in the node Next.js itself. This component doesn't get executed in the client, which is your browser. So how do you create a client component? For that, the syntax is very simple. So come to app, right click, create a new folder called as components. And then here I'll just create a profile component. So it's up to, I'll just create something about dot. Here you need to specify TSX because we installed TypeScript, right? Not JavaScript. The extension is TSX. And then how do you create a command? What is the shortcut? RAFCE, right? So now about component, here I'll log something. What I'll do, I'll just log hello from about hello from about component. Okay, this is done. So now let me check here. If I rerun, I'm not getting hello from about component. Why? Does anyone know the reason? Which is my parent component here, root component. It's inside page.tsx. This is my home is my root component. So this root component gets rendered through something called as layer.tsx. So what this layer.tsx does is, this will take your parent component and then it will run it as a children. You can see here. Children means whatever component is there as in the root inside the app, that component, what this layer.tsx will do, it will take and render. Okay. That means if I want any component to appear, I need to add it inside my home component. So now what I'll do below this, I'll add a home component. So how do you do that? About, this is the syntax, right, on how to call a component. This is very similar to React. Okay. Next.js is nothing but 80% of your React. Okay. So now once this is done, come here, refresh. You can see I'm getting hello from Next.js. This is a server. That means this component is getting rendered in the server. Hello from about component. This is also server component. So how do I change this to client component? Here, you can see in the PPT I mentioned, you need to use this word. Use client at the topmost. So how do you do that? Come to about. Here at the topmost, you need to use client. So once you do this, what happens? Next.js will treat this as a client component. That means this component will get rendered in the browser, not in the server. Okay. So now let us check. I'll come and refresh. Here you can see, yeah. You can see from hello from Next.js, it is from server. If there is nothing, right, that means it is from the client. Okay, this is how you create server components and client components. This is very important to understand in Next.js. Okay. Go to the next topic. How do you do styles and Tailwind? So we went through what is Tailwind, right? So Tailwind is nothing but a pre-built Tailwind. If you go to Tailwind, here you go to docs, or else components, it's up to you guys. Here they'll give some snippets. Here you can see if I want to use tables, I'll click on this. Say for example, if I want something like a cool button or something. Let me search for buttons. Here you can see page section, headers. There are so many things here. It'll take a lot of time. Say, for example, if I want to use something like toggle button. So this is log. This is a pro version, I guess. So yeah, the thing is in Tailwind CSS, instead of writing your own CSS, you'll use something called as inline CSS. You can see if you go to docs, here you can see if I want to write something like where is the text? Yeah, if I want to create a flex box, right? We just have to use these keywords like you can see here flex, flex auto, flex none. Then you can see width. It's nothing but W and the number which you want to set. So what happens is in React application we wrote, right? All the CSS you'll write inside here itself. That is called as your Tailwind CSS. So with Next.js, you'll get a predefined configuration for that. You don't have to externally install. Okay. So now I'll just click on some component. Let me select some free component here. I'll click on this table itself. Once you go here, say for example, if I want to use this table, what I'll do, go to get the code. It's asking for price, I guess. Yeah, it's fine. Now, like now you got to know, right? How to use your Tailwind CSS. Say for example, if I want to style this about component, so I'll go to class, text red. So what happens is when I open my file, right? I'll create a flex box. And then I'll wrap this inside another tag. So now what will happen here is, here you can see flex box has been applied. Here you can see I created a flex justify between. That means there is a space in between. So similar way, you can add different styles to this. You can go through the Tailwind CSS. If you, for example, if you want to set some background color, right? Here you can see how to do that background color. So for example, if I want to set something like background BG black, for example, BG red. So how to do that? I'll copy this. I'll go here. Inside this, I'll paste it here. BG red 300. Now you can see if I refresh, I'm getting a background color. Okay. This is how you use your Tailwind CSS. Other than Tailwind CSS, there is something called as CSS modules. Okay. Before that, we'll just go through what are styles. So here we got to know there is something called as global.css, right? This global.css is used for global styles. That means whatever styles you have here will get affected throughout your Next.js application. Okay. Say for example, if you don't want global styles, you want a component specific styles. So how do you do that? For that, there is something called as CSS modules. Okay. What CSS modules will do? This, whatever CSS you write, it will be component specific. Component specific means, say for example, what happens is in global.css, I have a class called as main. Okay, here I'll set color red. Okay. And then inside some other style sheet also, I have something called as main color red. So here what happens is some of the classes may get overridden because it has a similar name. So to avoid this, there is something called as CSS modules. So whenever you use CSS modules, what happens is a unique ID will be generated at the end of each class. Due to this, there won't be any conflicts of interest. Okay. This is nothing but component specific. So how do you do that? The syntax is very simple. First, you need to specify your folder name and then this is keyword folder name dot module dot CSS. So once you create this, this will become your CSS modules. That means it will become component specific. Then all the styles will be having an ID at the end. So we'll just create one main thing. So here I'll come in this about, right click, new file. Here what I'll do, create about dot module dot CSS. So here what happens is, if I create a main class, right? For example, like text main text. Okay. I'll make this as color blue, background color red. So now I need to attach this class. So how do I do that? You don't use like link and all, like your regular CSS. You need to import this as an object. So how do you do that? I'll go to my about. I'll remove this Tailwind CSS. Here I need to import my CSS module. So how do you do that? First import styles from dot slash about slash module slash CSS. So now once I import this, all the styles, whichever I have here, I can access it as an objects inside my styles. So how do I do that? Come to this class, instead of flower brackets, and then you need to copy the styles, paste here, and then which class I need to access, main text, right? I'll copy and paste it here. Okay. You'll get confused by this, but don't get confused. So now what happens, if I run this, you can see I'm getting a style. So now if I open this class in inspect, right, you can see here, just a minute. If I select on this, if I go for this component, you can see this is the class name. What is my class name here? My class name is main text, but here what has been created, about slash main text slash, you can see here one unique ID. Okay, this is the use of CSS modules. So when you create your CSS inside your module.css, a unique ID will be generated so that you won't be having any conflicts. Okay. And then how do you use that? Using import and then style dot, you can access your CSS names. Okay. Now we got to know how to create styles, how to create CSS modules, and then your JSX, and then Tailwind. Okay. Now we'll go through the most complex topic in Next.js, which is routing. Okay. So what is routing? So we went through what is routing, right? So I'll just open the Next.js documentation itself. Next.js. Sorry. Okay, Node.js. You can see Next.js by Vercel. That means Vercel is the company which created this. This is a React framework. So once I open this, you can see here, if you want to learn more about Next.js, you can go through the documentation itself. This is the command, right? We used to create. As I scroll down, you can see there's so many tools which are handed to you to create your Next.js application. Okay. So now what I wanted you guys to know is what is routing. You guys by now would have been familiar. Here you can see if I click on showcase, I'll get showcase. If I click on docs, I'll get docs. Blog, I'll get blog. Templates, it's taking into the new file, it's okay. Click on this, I'm getting this data. That means every component is attached to the route. So now the key thing is, whenever we created routing in Angular or React, how did we create like this, right? We created a path. First, we created a path and then we attached a component. We did the same thing in Angular also. We created a path and then we attached the component. But this kind of syntax doesn't work in Next.js because Next.js uses something called as file routing. Here you can see, I'll zoom in. It uses file-based routing. That means whatever files you create will be converted as routes inside your Next.js. Okay, that is the magic of Next.js. You don't have to configure paths, path name components and all. You just need to create folders. Once you create a folder, every folder you create will become a route path. Okay. And then here I'll just, there are some set of rules on how to create it. First, we'll go through this. Next.js provides file-based routing system. That means you create files for your route paths. The structure of the pages, that means whatever structure you have here, you can see there are two folders here. One is index about.js. So what Next.js will do, it will create two paths. One is index path and about path. Here the routes are determined automatically based on your folder. Okay, you just create folders. Next.js will convert that folders into routes. Okay, it will automatically generate routes. Okay, the rules are all the routes must be inside the app folder. So which is our app folder? So this is our app folder, right? All the routes must be inside this app itself or else it won't work. The second rule is every file that has a corresponding route must be named page.tsx or jsx. We'll go through this. And then every folder corresponds to the path name in the browser. That means every whatever file name you give, whatever folder name, that folder name will become the path name. Okay, and then every folder to become a route, it should be having a file called as page.tsx or js. If you're using TypeScript, it is tsx. If you're using .js, for example, if you're using JavaScript, it is .js. Okay, and then only components which are exported by default renders in the page.tsx. We'll go through these rules in the programmatic way. So now you just get to know that every folder is your route. Okay, how do I do that? Say for example here, inside my app, where is my app? This is my app, right? So what I need to do is, here I need to, I'll remove this about component. Where is my page.tsx? I'll comment this. So here you can see this is my Next.js application. So now what I need to do is I need to create a route here. If I click /users, I need to open the users component. Here you can see it is saying 404. This page cannot be found. The thing with Next.js is there is already a inbuilt file for 404. That means if you put any unnecessary URL which is not there, Next.js will automatically say that this page cannot be found. So now what I need to do is I need to create this path, this route. So how do I do that? Every folder is your route. So now I need to create a folder name called as users. So let's create it. So come here, inside web, where should the users be? It should be inside the app folder, right? That was our first rule. So what we'll do, I'll go to my app. Inside app, I'll create a new folder. Okay. Right click on the app, new folder. What is that? Users. Hit enter. Okay. Once this is done, what was the second rule? Every folder should contain a file called as page.js or tsx. Since we are using TypeScript, I'll use tsx. Go to the users, right click, new file, page.tsx. This is very important. This is hard coded, page.tsx. If you use capital P or else if you do spelling mistakes, it doesn't work. This should be exact, page.tsx. Okay. First, you need to create a folder. This folder will be converted to the route. Every folder which is converted to the route should have a file called as page.tsx. So, and then what is page.tsx is nothing but a file which default export a component. Here you can see I have mentioned in the last line. So what is the command? RAFCE. Once you do this, you'll get this. So how am I able to access the shortcut RAFCE? I went through that, right? Go to the extensions. Here you need to install this ES7 extension in the VS Code. Once you install, you will get a tools to generate some shortcuts. Okay. So now I'll go to my page.tsx, where inside my users. Now I need to rename this as capital because this is a component. Okay. If you're getting confused, right? Go to page.tsx. By hand itself, I'll write the code. Export default users. Okay, what should the component return? Should return a JSX. H1. Sorry, it should be outside. Just a minute. Right, this is RFC. So now what I'll do, I'll make this as users. Change this users. Okay. Let's see. Okay. You got this. First, you need to create a folder called as users. This folder, whatever name you have, will be converted to the URL path. So inside every folder, you need to have a file called as page.tsx. This is predefined. You cannot give your own names. Okay. Here you need to give the name as page.tsx, and inside every page.tsx, it should export default of component. Here users is my component. This returns JSX. So now let's try accessing this users. Previously what I got 404, right? Here you can see what I'll get. I'm getting users data here. That means I have successfully created a route path in Next.js. Okay. This is very hard to understand as a beginner, but I want you guys to get familiar with it. Okay. Similarly, say if I want to create a profile route, here you can see instead of users, I want to click on profile. I'll get 404 because this route is not there. So how do I do that? Inside app, I need to create another folder. Right click, new folder, and then here you need to create profile. And then every folder, what should it contain? I mentioned in the PPT page.tsx. Then right click, new file, page.tsx. And then what should page.tsx do? It should export default component. Okay, so how do you do that? RAFCE. Click on this. I'll change my component name. So what is my component name? Profile. Right? Copy paste it here. This should be exported default, or else you won't get the component rendered. Okay. Once this is done, I'll create a data here. My profile. So now let us check whether this route has been generated by the Next.js. So how do I check that? I'll come here. Here you can see, if I refresh my profile, I can successfully access this. Okay. I'll try to write some data here. Create a lice. Name. Create another line. So now if I run this, you can see here, whatever I'm typing here, I'm getting this. Where am I getting this? Inside my profile path. Okay, if I do users right, what will I get? I'll get users data. This is how you achieve routing inside your Next.js. Okay. You won't be using some third-party packages like in React. What we used in React we used like React router DOM, right? What was the syntax? It was looking something like this. We created a path and then we attached a component. But this thing doesn't work in Next.js. The Next.js, it follows a file-based routing system. So every folder will be converted to the route. Okay, you should be careful on what name you'll use here. So whatever name you use here will be converted to the route path. And inside every folder, you need to have a, where is it? Users. Inside every folder, you need to have a file called as page.tsx. Okay. Inside page.tsx, it should export default component. Okay. Whenever I visit this path, this component will get rendered. Okay. You understood how do you achieve routing inside your Next.js application? It's very simple as that. Create a folder, add a page.tsx, and then export default component, and then write your code inside the component. Okay, this folder will be converted to the path, URL path. So now say, for example, I want to create another folder on, like for example, inside users, I need to create nested routes. I'll show inside here. So here you can see I also mentioned the steps in the PPT first. You need to create a folder with a name. And then you need to create a page.tsx. And then page.tsx should have a component. This component should be exported by default. Okay. Then whatever profile you set, whatever the folder name you have, it gets converted to the route path. Okay. Next, we'll go through what is nested routes. Now, say for example, inside the URLs itself, I'll do /URLs/first. So if I hit enter, I'll get 404. This route is now there. That means I'm accessing the route inside my users. Okay, not only outside the users. If I put profile, this will be outside the users. I need to access inside the users. Users/first user. If I click on this, I'll get 404. But now how do I create this nested? Here you can see this is nested, right? You have first URL, inside that you have another URL. This is called as nested routes. So how do I achieve this inside my Next.js? It's very simple. Here, inside which is my first user, inside users, right? So what I'll do, I'll just go to my users. I'll create another folder called as what? First user. Hit enter. Inside that, what you need to do? What is the file name? Page.tsx. So what does the page.tsx should return? Should return a component by default. So now I'll just rename this as first user. Okay. Copy paste this. Now what will happen? Let us see. Okay, what we did, we created a folder inside users called as first user. And then inside first user, we created a file called as page.tsx. So what does this page.tsx do? This will export default this first user component, which will render this data. Let us see whether it's coming or not. Here you can see, yeah, I'm successfully getting. So if I click on users, I'll just get only users. Okay. If I click on slash first user, this is a nested route. Here I can see I'm getting first user is you. Okay. This is how you achieve nested routes inside your Next.js application. Here you can see in the PPT. You need to create subfolders. It's very simple as that. If you want to create a route, you need to create a folder. Say, for example, if you want to create a nested routes, you need to create subfolders. Okay. Say, for example, if you want to create nested routes. So what you have to do, you need to create subfolders. It's as simple as that. Okay. Then inside every folder, you need to have this page.tsx, and then every page.tsx should return a component by default. Okay. Then how do you access dynamic routes? Yeah. We'll go through what is dynamic routes here. So here what happens is, say for example, inside my profile, right? So what I'll do, profile. So now I'm getting this, my profile, name, age, gender. So now say for example, I need to pass a path parameter here. So what is path parameter? We went in yesterday also, right? In Express.js when we were connecting through MongoDB. So that means I'll pass the data here. Say for example, if I pass 1, I should be able to access this data here. Say for example, if I pass some name, I need to access this name inside here, right? Say for example, if I want to access this name, if I click enter, I'll get not found. But say for example, if I want to access this path parameter inside my profile, so how do I do that? This is called as dynamic routes. So for that, the syntax is very simple. So what will come, I'll go to my profile, right click, new folder. So instead of direct folder name, whenever you're using dynamic paths, right? That means you don't know what the path may be because it is given by the user. This is called as dynamic path. So for that, the syntax is first you need to give square brackets. Inside square brackets, you need to mention the path parameter variable name. So here what I'll do, I'll just create profile name. and click enter. Okay, that's it. Whenever you're trying to access a dynamic route, you need to create a square brackets and then mention the path parameter name. Okay, once this is done, what does every folder contain for the routes? Here you can see what is this page.tsx. So what I'll do, I'll again go here, I'll create another page.tsx. Okay, what does page.tsx do? It should return a function, right? Component RAFCE. Click on enter. I'll remove this. I'll change this to profile details. Okay. I'll copy, I'll paste this. Okay. Now what I'll do instead of this thing, right? I'll copy this whole thing, Control X. I'll paste it inside my profile details. Inside this, I'll add it here. I don't need this. I'll just create a name. So my set h2. My name is. I'll just do dash dash dash. Okay. Let us see whether I can achieve this. So what I should do is first I need to go here. Inside profile, what if I click on profile, what will I get? Here you can see I'll get only this data. Okay. So for example, you have a lot of components here, lot of JSX. It's up to you guys. If I write too much code, you guys will get confused because file routing inside a Next.js is very hard topic to understand. Okay, so I'm keeping it as simple as possible. Okay, so now here you can see inside my profile, I have a page.tsx. So once I click on this profile, I'll be able to access my profile. Say, for example, I want to pass a path parameter here. So for that, what is the syntax? Square brackets, and then here you need to mention your path parameter name. So here, what is the profile name? Inside that, you need to create a page.tsx. So now let us see whether this is successfully rendering or else whether it is throwing a 404. I'll do Varsha. Yeah, I can access. I'll change this name. Varun. Yeah, it is getting, but I'm not getting this data, right? That's what I wanted to achieve. So how do we get this data? So in React, there is a thing called as props. You know that, right? Our old friend props. So what is props? Props is nothing but the data which is passed by another component. So here what happens is whatever dynamic paths you have here will be passed as props. So now what I need to do, I need to go inside my dynamic route. This is my dynamic route, right? I have a square brackets. Here inside the function, I need to access props. Okay. Then how do I access this props inside JSX? Brackets, props dot. What is my route parameter name? Profile name. Now let us see whether I'm able to access. I'll refresh this. Cannot read properties of undefined profile name. Okay. Let us see the spelling. Props. Or else let me just console log and see whether what data I'm getting inside my props. So this is how you write your code. Okay. I'll just log this props. Let me check what am I really getting before accessing the data. So now I'll go here, right click, I'll go to console. I'll refresh this. Profile slash. I'm getting undefined. Let me check it. Profile details. Sorry, not props, params. Got confused because the name sounds similar. Right? We went through what is params in React, right? So what are props? Props are the data which gets passed. But here I got confused. This is not the data. This is a URL, right? So how do you access any data in the URL? We went through in Express also. There is a function called as params. We went yesterday, right? Request.params.id. Through that, we got the URL data. Okay, similar way, here instead of props, I need to access params. Let me just console log and see whether I'm getting that params data. So now what I'll do, I'll just refresh this. You can see I'm getting a promise. Okay. Let me just try to access this. Params.profile name. Let us see what I'm getting. Whether I'm getting an error or is, yeah, I'm not getting an error, I'm getting the data. So now if I change this to another name, right? So yeah, now you know how you can access successfully use dynamic routing. Here you can see. Dynamic route means sometimes whatever data you have, right, this is not prefixed. So here you can see in the user, this nested route is prefixed. That means there is a name called as first user. This cannot be changed. But here dynamic route means based on this data, I need to access inside my component. So how do I do that? First, you need to add a square brackets. Inside that page.tsx. Inside you need to access params, not props. Props is to access the data. We'll also go through how do you access through props. Whenever you have something related to URL, you should use params. Okay, using params, I'm fetching the profile name. So this name and this name should match. Okay, so now you can see I can successfully get this data. If I just put profile, I'll get only my profile. Okay, we went through this, right? So now we got to know how to create route, and then how do you create nested route, and then how do you create dynamic routes. Okay, so now here we have something called as not found. Okay, what is not found? Say for example, if I go here, I'll type something, I'll get, sorry, not this, remove this. I'll type some random gibberish. What will I get? I'll get 404, this page cannot be found, right? Now say for example, you want to create your own custom 404 not found page. Okay, this looks black and white. Say for example, you are someone who likes colors. So if you want to create your own not found page, it's very simple. Go to your app. Inside, you need to create a folder name called as, sorry, folder, not a file, not hyphen found. The name should be exact. Okay, not hyphen found. Here you can see, not hyphen found. And then inside every folder, what should contain? Page.tsx. So we'll create a page.tsx. And then here, I'll generate a component, RAFCE. So here what I'll do, I'll remove this, not found. I'll copy paste this again. Now let us see whether this will work or not. Come here, I'll refresh this. Just a minute. Not found. Not found. Page.tsx. I'll try to rerun this again. Right. Let me check whether my routes are working. First, which and all routes I have? I have users route. Users. Yeah, inside users, what do I have? First user. I'll check whether this also will work. Yeah, even this is working fine. And then we created another route. What was that? Profile, right? Yeah, my routes are successfully working. Okay. Now what I need to do. So this is how you create your not found. Okay, it's very simple. You just need to mention not hyphen found, and then inside you need to create a page.tsx. Okay. Sometimes if it's not working, you have to rerun the server. But now I won't be rerunning the server again since I have a very less time. So now say for example, what happens is sometimes you need to create a folder, but that should be not working as a route path. Okay. Say for example, I need to create a folder here. Okay, what I'll do, I'll create a new folder called as personal. So here this personal also will have what? Page.tsx. And then this will also generate a component. RAFCE personal personal. Yeah. There is no component called as personal component, but I'm just giving an example here. So now say for example, if I want to create something called as a personal component. So now what happens if I create a folder and page, if I access personal, right? I can access my personal component. But sometimes I don't want to access even though I have a folder and page.tsx file. So how do you do that? It's very simple. You need to attach a underscore at the starting of your file name. So once you attach an underscore at the starting of your file name, this will be treated as a private folder. That means this folder doesn't get added to the routes, even though it has a page.tsx file. Okay, now let us see that here, if I run here, /personal, I can access my personal component, right? So now see what happens if I add underscore to this. I'll rename this. I'll add an underscore. So now once this is done, let's see here, if I access this, I'll get 404. This page cannot be found. But this is there here. You can see here. So here you can see this component is there. This route is there. But as soon as you add underscore, what happens? This will get converted to private route. So whatever private route is there, private folder, it won't get added to the routes. Okay. Now there is also something called as catch all or capture. So now what happens is, say for example, I need to create a route here. Personal, not personal. I'll take users itself. Inside users, say for example, I'll add first user. Okay, I'll get this data. Say for example, after first user, I need to add as many routes as I can. Okay, here what will happen? It will throw an error. I don't want this. So what I want to do is, no matter how many routes you have, I need to access this. So now this becomes a problem here. Why? If I have, for example, like 1, 2, 3, 4 routes, I need to create 4 folders, nested 4 folders. Say, for example, if I have some 20, for example, if you take any area only, you can see, I'll go to the Tailwind CSS. So here you can see, if you have these many folders, right? This many route data, you need to create for like 20, 30 folders, which becomes a huge mess. So to avoid that, inside Next.js, there is something called as slug. Okay. Let's first try to implement and then see what it is. So the syntax is, first you need to create a folder and then a slug. What is the syntax? Square brackets, 3 dots, and then the name called as slug. Okay. So now we'll try to create that. Inside users, what I'll do, I'll create a new folder, square brackets, 3 dots, slug. Okay. Here that every folder, like what should it contain? Page.tsx. Yeah, I'll do RAFCE. Here I'll create a any component you want. Users, details. Copy and paste it again. So now, how do I access something which comes from the URL to params, right? So now, what I'll do, I'll create params, and then I'll just simply console log to check what am I getting. Okay, so now I've created a slug file, and then inside that I created a component called as app.tsx. So now let us check what do I really get. Come here, console, I'll hit on refresh. Okay, I'm getting a promise. Since promise cannot be directly accessed, what I need to do is, let me try to access 0. That means the index 1. Okay. Right. Here you can see in the PPT, the step 1 is, what are the steps? First, you need to create a folder called as triple dots slug. So what this does is, basically what it will do, whatever, like how many parameters or how many routes, whatever you have, you add here. Say for example, you are adding some 20, 30 routes here. So you want to access all these routes. Okay. That, for example, you have some 20 routes here, you need to create 20 folders. Okay. To avoid this, we'll use something called as slug. Okay. So what is slug? I'll zoom in. Here you can see slug. You need to add it inside a square brackets. That means this is a dynamic path. This is a dynamic path, right? This is not a fixed path. Okay. Since it's a dynamic path, since it has many names to it, you need to access inside the slug. Okay. Any route with this folder name, you can add any URL path. So whatever you add like next to it, you can access it. Okay. To access it, it has a params property string of slug. Let me try it again. There it is saying any. Those are details. What is that? Let us see what is the error. Okay, this is saying failed to compile. Expression expected. But okay, I guess there is some error with the folder itself. I'll try to recreate this again. Before that, you got to know what is slug, right? Slug is used to access all the dynamic routes data. Okay, what is the syntax? Square brackets, triple dots, slug. Okay, so now first we'll cover this topic. After this, we'll come back to this slug, because the thing is, whenever you create something in TypeScript, right, you need to define what is this type annotations. Okay, this type annotations takes a lot of time to configure. So for first, you need to check what what data you're getting here, and then you need to create interfaces and all. So before we get into that, let us quickly go through what is route handlers, and then we'll come back to this topic again. Okay. So what are route handlers? So here what we did, so still now we created a folders, and then every folder, what it did, it generated a page.tsx, and then this page.tsx in turn exported a profile, which is a component which render the UI. So now say for example, I don't want the UI. I need an API. So what is API? Application programming interface, right? We did like we went through what is API yesterday itself. So now say for example, if I want to return an API, so how do I do that? So for that, since Next.js supports both front end as well as back end, inside here itself, we can create APIs. So how do you do that? To come to app, I'll minimize this. Here you need to create a new folder called as API. Okay. Inside that, you need to create a file called as route.ts. This name is fixed. You cannot change this name. Okay. What is that name? Here you can see this is used to handle server-side logic for HTTP request. So inside Next itself, I can get the UI as well as I can get the API. You can see the magic which is happening here, right? If you want to get the API, you need to, without the Next.js, you need to create a separate Express.js. But here inside one itself, we can access everything. So how do you do that? So here, come to this, create a folder called as API, and then inside that, you need to create a folder called as route.ts. So inside, you need to create a function. First, export function. I'll create, you should make this as an async function. Async function. What is the function name? Get. Okay. What is get? Get is a HTTP method, right? It should return next response dot JSON. And then here you need to pass the data. This is API data from Next.js. And now what will happen here is, since I have a folder called as API, what will happen? I can, like, what does Next.js do? It will generate a path here. This topic is called as route handling. Okay. So here what I'll do slash API. Once I hit here, I'll just delete this file. I'll refresh this. Here you can see if I hit slash API, right? Let it load. It's taking some time. Slash API. So now, since this is an API, what I need to do? So yesterday we went through, right? Thunder client. So what is Thunder client? Thunder client is used to test your APIs. So you can use Postman or Thunder client. It's up to you guys. You can use anything you want. So here what you'll do, let's just go to the steps here. First, you need to create a folder. Inside that, you can create any folders you want. You can create users or anything. But as of now, here I just simply created a simple one file, and then inside that, I created a route.ts. Okay, route.ts. Then inside every route, what happens? There is an HTTP method. Okay, what is the syntax? Export async function get. And then here you need to return a response. What I'm doing here, I'm returning a Next.js response JSON and then the data here. So now what I'll do, I'll try to access this inside my Thunder client. So how do I do that? Come here, copy this whole thing. I can see here, I can successfully get the data. So how do I do that? I'll go through this again. First, you need to create a API folder. Inside that, you need to create a file called as route.ts. Okay. inside that route.ts, what does API do? API handles HTTP requests, right? So what are HTTP requests? Get, post, put, delete. These are your HTTP requests. So to create this, what I need to do first, you need to export and then async. Async because this is an asynchronous function. And then function, here you need to specify get. Okay. And then this should return a response. Response.json. Then here you need to specify the JSON data. So data, this is my JSON data. And then I'll create another parameter, property, message. So now how to access this API? First, you need to go to your browser /API. So once I click on refresh, you can see I'm able to access data. This is my JSON data, and then I'm able to get the message. Okay. Which is this format? This format is JSON. Say, for example, if I want to access the UI, so how do I do that? Come and change the path here. Profile. So what does this return? This returns the UI. Say, for example, if I don't want the UI, I want the APIs. Come here, API, getting the API. So this is how you can create both front end and back end inside your Next.js. Okay. Let's go through the PPT. Here you can see similar way, there is something called as post also. Okay, what is post? Post is used to create a, right? You have different HTTP methods. So one was get. Get is used to get the data. And then you have something called as post also. Post, or like what it is do, it is used to create the data. Inside here, you have something called as middleware. So we went through what is middleware also, right? In Express.js. In Express.js, we did so many circles to create a middleware. In Next.js, it's very simple. So what does middleware do? Middleware will try to modify the request response data through the request response lifecycle, right? Here, if I want to create a middleware, I can directly write it inside the route itself. Okay, here you can write logic to middleware. So now, if you want to access the request, how do you access the request data? Here you need to do request. You need to specify the type. Next request. Why do you need to specify the type? Because this is a TypeScript. TypeScript, you need to specify the type most of the times. So here now you can access the request. What you can do, you can write a logic to create the middleware. So for example, you can create outside also, inside also. It's up to you guys. So it's very simple. Say for example, I'll check if, say for example, if in the request there is a token. If there is some token in request, what I will do, I will return some data, or else I'll return an error. So this is how you create your middlewares. Okay. You can create middlewares inside the route itself. What is my API routes? Inside get. Okay. Or else you can create middleware outside and then use it inside all the functions, different HTTP methods. It's very simple. Okay. You don't have to much worry about it. In Express, you need to create separately and then import and do stuff, right? Here you can do inside the routes itself, middlewares. Okay. Then what is pending? So yeah, Slug, there is some issue with this. This and what is image optimization? What is server-side rendering? So what is static site generation? All this will go to tomorrow. Okay. So as of now, that's it. You guys can practice. Try to create a Next.js project. Try to create routes. Try to understand what is server and client components. Try to more concentrate on routes because this is kind of confusing as a beginner. Okay. Here you can see how do you create nested routes, and then how do you create dynamic routes, and how do you create a private folders. Okay. Other than that, if you have any doubts, you can ask in the comment section. Other than that, yeah, thank you.
Yeah, thank you, sir. So students, thank you for joining. So we'll meet again by tomorrow at 7:30. Thank you all. We are winding up for the day. Good night.